if I could just get in here and get me about $50,000 to $100,000, I could pay off all my debts.
The Reverend Dr. James Smith, he's a former attorney, a retired pastor, gambling addict, author, and bank robber who served 5 years in federal prison.
I learned humility. Here I had been this lawyer, thought I was on top of the world, and now I'm washing windshields, I'm pumping gas. Only thing that was going through my mind was that all they could see is African American who had robbed a bank.
Maybe hurt people. They think, oh, you can never change. And that's not true. But your heart has to change.
I pray that you will continue to bless his podcast, and we're praying that somebody will be blessed just by hearing our stories today. Out in 1986, I'm very, very excited of what I've done and who I am now. And it was crazy. So, I'm not trying to fix it up. I like for anybody to know is that the darkest hour is just before dawn. And we just thank you for all that you do in our lives. In Jesus' precious name we pray.
Welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Real quick, if you find value in this episode, please take a moment to like, comment, or subscribe. It helps build this channel. Today, I'm honored to have the Reverend Dr. James Smith joining us. Reverend Smith has quite the resume. He's a former attorney, a retired pastor, gambling addict, author, and bank robber who served 5 years in federal prison. Reverend Smith, thank you so much for joining me. That is quite the resume. I'm sure it wasn't all in that order, but I really do appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us, and I can't wait to hear about your life.
Okay, well, thank you again for having me come on your show today. Just a little bit about me. I always just say that I was just a country lawyer who robbed a bank, and I received a 15-year sentence, which I served 5 years in the Federal Correctional Institution in Ashland, Kentucky. One of those years I spent at the camp in Petersburg, Virginia. Everyone, including myself, concluded that I had become a compulsive gambler. And that's what I kind of talked about in my first book that I wrote, Deal by Me, A Golden Opportunity to Belong, because that's what I really, but as time passed, I began to reflect on my past, and I did a self-evaluation of my life. And in my second book, Deal by Me, A Self-Evaluation, the second edition, I eventually came to the conclusion that I was not a compulsive gambler, but rather I was afraid to fail. Now, I know people will ask, how did that happen? Well, I wanted to go to a Gambling Anonymous session to just speak with the guys about gambling, because I thought that's where I was, and I thought I could help somebody because I was no longer gambling. And of course, the director of the program said to me, "Are you still a compulsive gambler?" I said, "No." He said, "You're not a compulsive gambler?" I say, "No, I'm not." And he said to me, "Well, I don't think the guys would appreciate hearing from you, because we believe that once a compulsive gambler, always a compulsive gambler." Same kind of concept as alcohol, a step. And so that's when I began to reevaluate my life, and I came to that conclusion that I was not a compulsive gambler, but rather I was afraid to fail. And so people asked me why. Well, I had become this first and only African-American lawyer practicing in the state of, in my hometown, and of Lewisburg, North Carolina, about 30 miles outside of Raleigh, North Raleigh. And of course, At that time, I was the youngest African American lawyer practicing law in the state of North Carolina. I was 26 years of age. That's back in 1971. And so I came to the conclusion after really doing a self-evaluation of my life that it was more about me being afraid to fail. Now, I was gambling, I was playing poker, what have you, but I had lost my wife, I lost properties that I had accumulated, and I didn't want people to see me go down. And I thought that if I did what I did, I could recoup and I could bring myself back right where I was. Now that's silly thinking now. So don't assume that I agree. I still agree with that, but that's where I was. And so that's how I concluded. I came to that conclusion. I had become, well known, successful lawyer, and then I, just found myself losing everything that I had accomplished. And so that's kind of the story in a nutshell. I have since got out in 1986, and my journey back is just, I'm very, very excited for what I've done and who I am now. And of course, I'll leave it open for you to just ask me any questions. I don't want to keep talking. You can just.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, but I am curious, so I have a background in law enforcement. My dad was a pastor, so I got the pastor side of things down, the church side of things. And from a law enforcement side of things, what was kind of your mind thinking going into robbing a bank? Like, was it planned out? What did you expect to get? Was it life-changing money? Most bank robberies, they walk out with a few grand and that's it.
Well, I agree with you, but that's not the thinking when you do it. I didn't get up that morning with that intention. I got up that morning all confused, depressed, just didn't know what I was going to do. I was at the low point in my life. Wife and I had separated, lost properties. I felt that, it was kind of almost all over for me. And I went to office. I was sitting there contemplating committing suicide. But I'm an only child to single mom. And I started thinking about my mom, who was living with me at the time. And I somewhat abandoned that idea. I can't leave my mom like this. That's just not right. And so I got in my car and started riding. And of course, I ended up on 85. I thought about it again in front of a big transfer truck. But, and this time it really became something because I thought that the truck hit me in the back. I've been a lawyer, so, that would be good, good money for my mom to, relax and be okay with. But what started going through my mind then was that I might get maimed. It wouldn't kill me. And I didn't mind if it just took my life, but now, I'm around, I'm maimed and what have you. So that kind of made me abandon that and try to be a little reasonable about what I was doing. So I just continued on into the next city and went to a restaurant. And I guess it was about, maybe at this time, it's around about 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock. And I wanted to get me some breakfast and just sit down and kind of get my head together. That's basically where I was, just all messed up. And while I was eating, I looked out of the window and there was a Central Carolina bank. And of course, that's when my mind just started roving. It's just like, oh man, if I could just get in here and, get me about $50,000 to $100,000, I could pay off all my debts, and I'll be just right back to where I was, and nobody would know anything about what's going on. I'll be fine. That's how that all happened. Now, obviously it was crazy. So, I'm not trying to fix it up. It was just stupid, but but that was part of my reasoning, and that's how I went in. And that didn't even happen just easy. It was like, boy, I thought through it. I thought through it. I even rode around in the city some and thought, I said, I can't do this. And then, all of a sudden it hit you as shoot, get caught or not, and that's what I did. I just pulled right up in front of the bank, went in and said, stick up, give me your money. They threw a bag of money over and I took off, got in the car and took off, Now, what happened after that was so interesting.
I want to hear it.
I guess I went for about maybe half a mile, and I began to hear my car start trembling, and I didn't realize then, but they had put the pack of dye in the bag of money, and the fumes started coming into the car. I didn't know what it was, obviously now this is not my era, so I'm dumb to all of this. And so what happened, I just kind of cut the car and laid over on the steering wheel. And then something just told me to look back in the back on the seat, and I saw where the kind of explosion had burned the seat and whatever. So I got out, took the bag of money and threw it out across the field. Okay. I got back in the car and put my head back on the thing because my eyes was running water then because of all of the fumes in the car. And about that time, a police officer came up behind me, came up to the car. Now you got to note, I had been this practicing attorney for now, almost 10 years in the city. I run for district court judge. I was well known in a 5-county area. Everybody knew me. And so this officer came up to me. He recognized, he said, he's a lawyer. He said, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. They could tell I'd probably been crying and he said, you sure? I said, yeah. So he said, okay, all right, go ahead on. And he let me go. And so I started the car and I drove probably for about another half a mile, maybe a mile. And I got stopped again by the State Highway Patrol this time. State Highway Patrol stopped me and I just pulled to the side. This time I just knew it was all over. So, it wasn't a matter of trying to do anything. I would just stop and just look. I done got caught. This is me. But instead, he sat in the car for a while, and I didn't realize it then, but afterwards, I realized that he was checking my tags out and everything. And because at the moment, I was doing so bad until my insurance had lapsed, and I had everything in my uncle-in-law's name. So it was my car, but it was registered my uncle-in-law, so
yeah.
Now I'm thinking that that's what he was doing. So he sat there for a while. He finally got out and came up to the car, and I rolled the window down. And about that time when he started asking me a question, the previous police officer that had stopped me earlier, came by and hollered at the one. They said, I just stopped him. He's okay. And the State Highway Patrol told me, said, okay, go ahead on. And I drove off. I drove off again, but this time, reality set in. I knew that was it. So I drove straight to my former partner's office. We had separated by that time because of my gambling problems. So I just wanted to be on my own. And I got to his office. He was not there. I was in D.C., but the secretary was there. I told her what happened. She said, obviously she couldn't believe it. And so I told her to call my friend lawyer who was down in Warrenton. She called him, and he came immediately up. called a friend of mine who was a doctor in the area. He came immediately over, examined me. And by the time all of them came and was there, a swarm of law enforcement officers pulled up in his yard. And my lawyer friend went to the door and they asked me if I was there. He told me, yeah, and I was ready to turn myself in. And they allowed me to ride back over to the city where this all happened. And they booked me, put me under a $100,000 bond. And of course, I stayed in jail in Oxford, who was the city, at overnight that time. And the early morning, my lawyer had already asked the DA, whom I knew. I knew all these folk, the DAs and everybody, and asked the DA could they have a hearing to determine my mental competence. I said, you can understand that. All of a sudden, here's this problem lawyer and all this stuff was happening. So they did that, and the judge agreed to the hearing, and he issued an order sending me to Dorothea Dix Mental Hospital for a 6 weeks evaluation. I stayed about 3 weeks, and I called my lawyer and I said, look, I'm just ready to get out of here. But those 3 weeks were 3 weeks of real reflection for me. It was just like, how did all this happen to me? What was going on with me? I mean, my faith kicked in. I mean, everything. My mom was very, very dedicated Christian and committed Christian. And so I just started thinking about her, thinking about times she was taking me to church. And, so it was just a different moment. And I came to the realization that, look, this has happened to me. I messed up. I just got to get it behind me. And I got ready to accept whatever was going to come, get it over with, and pull my life back together. Move on. And and that happened while I was in the mental hospital. I didn't wait for any other time. I tell people who even now when I talk to folks, if you think that sending somebody to jail is going to what's the word we use? It's going to
rehabilitate them.
Rehabilitate them, yeah. It's going to rehabilitate them. That's a false premise. You do it through your heart or your mind. That's where you got to get if you want to get there. And that's where I had gotten. I said, I'm okay. I'll go in. And so I stayed out after I got out of the mental hospital, I stayed out about 6 months. And during that time, I began to find myself more involved in my faith, that in church, ministers talking to me, people praying with me. And of course, I felt the call, went to my minister and told him that, I felt the call to accept, the ministry and the call to preach. And I told him that I didn't want to, in Baptist church, you do what we call a trial sermon. Okay. Mm-hmm. I told him, I said, I don't want to do that until I get out, because I don't want folk thinking that I'm doing all of this to avoid, going in. Yep. And so he said, no, don't want you to do that. He said, I want you to go ahead on and accept it and do your trial sermon. And he said, if the Lord asks you to do that, you do it. Yep. And so I preached my trial initial sermon that Sunday night, and that Monday morning, I went to federal court and I was given a 15-year sentence and off to prison.
Oh man.
That's the way it happened. But I was fine. I really was. I honestly was fine. My mom broke down in the courthouse, but I was fine. I knew I messed up. I wasn't trying to hide it. I had told my mom, I said, I'm going to be okay. I said, you take care of yourself. I left her the car, and there was a little money I still had that my former partner kept, and to be able to my mom needed something to help her out. And that's what I did. So that 5 years that I was in, at that time, if you spent 1/3 of your time and without any problems, you could get out within, 1/3. So that's the reason I spent on the 5 years.
Yeah, but
So,
years is still a long time to sit and think about what you
oh,
did regardless. And it's interesting with the federal system that
mhm,
a lot of times it is like months or a
mhm.
year before you get sentenced and actually go.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you had all this time. It's like part of you would just like, let's get it over with. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
would you rather have started quicker or did you take that time to kind of,
I think I probably needed that time because that time gave me a lot of reflection. It helped me. I did have a job. So I got one of my friends who uh, had a service station, allowed me to come down and pump gas. Way back then you pump gas for the
oh, yeah,
people.
always, yeah, yeah.
Pump gas, and I wash windshield. My former clients and friends would come by, talk to me, and I guess I worked with him for maybe a little over a month. Then one of the politicians, who was a county commissioner, owned a food market. It was very kind of large, about the size of that, a smaller size Safeway or Food Line. And at that time we didn't have Food Line, Kroger, and all that stuff back in way back then. And so he allowed me to come and work with him. And I asked him. He said, "Well, lawyer, I don't have a job. I think you might want." And because I think he thought I wanted to work in the business office or something, capable. And I said, "No." I said, "Whatever you can give me, I'll take it." So he said, "Well, if you will do that," he said, "you got a job." So he gave me a job, and I went and I worked behind the cash register. They rung up the customers. I bagged the groceries, and at that time you walk groceries out to the car and that's what I did. And I did that all the way up until the time of my sentencing. But in the process, I gained so much because I learned humility. Here I had been this lawyer, thought I was on top of the world, and now I'm washing windshields, I'm pumping gas for my former clients and my friends, my relatives, and I'm walking their groceries out to the car and all that kind of stuff. And it just brought me down to a level where it really helped me. So I say now that I think I needed that because even when I went in, I was fine. I worked in the adult basic education, helping guys there. I worked in the chaplain's office, and as a matter of fact, I did some things while I was confined that my chaplain, who I've been in contact with even since I've been out, told me that nobody else had ever done. I got a chance to leave and go to prison fellowship seminars while I was there. And nobody believes this, but I had to tell it anyway. And my chaplain told me I was the only person who's ever done it. But they allowed me to leave the prison in Ashland, Kentucky, and go to D.C. I flew and come back by myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah.
As a matter of fact, it was such a situation where they couldn't even let the other inmates know what had happened. They thought I had gone back to court.
They wouldn't be too happy if they knew you were flying around the country having a good time.
Well, they thought I had gone back to court. So, that's where they left me. When I came back, I had some of my family members were there because my chaplain notified them that I would be in D.C. for this thing. So my friends showed up and they bought my dress clothes, and I got dressed in my suit and everything for the seminar, and when I came back to the prison, I had on my suit and tie, And they said, you can't come here like this.
I'm a lawyer.
They,
Oh man.
they,
Well,
yeah.
you followed through on your, what you said you were going to do when you, coming back, but before you went in, saying you wanted to be a minister, and you served your time and you served it honorably, and you paid for your sins. And, once you got out, you became a minister, obviously, but can you kind of tell me about that process? And then once you became a minister, like, because my dad was a pastor for 25, 30 years. And like, I know when you got to go interview at the church, or, basically all the deacons come around and go, let's talk about this guy. How do you explain yourself to them?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's an interesting situation. Well, when I first got out, I went to the halfway house. And from the halfway house, you had to get a job when you go to the halfway house. They required you get a job. I wasn't certain, but I felt pretty confident that if I saw one of my comrades who was in the law, they knew me, that they would give me a job. So I went straight to the courthouse here in Durham, and I saw one of the lawyers, very well-known attorney, and I just said, his name was Buddy Malone. I just said, Buddy, I say, look, I'm out and I just need a job. And he said, Smitty, he said, come by the office tomorrow morning. So I went by the office, and sure enough, he gave me a job. Didn't pay me much, but I was, what we call a law clerk. I I did probably most of the work because because he was in court, but I was drafting the complaints and selling the accident cases and what have you. But my mind was still on my ministry. So I applied to go to seminary, and Southeastern Theological Seminary. And when I applied, the first time I applied, they denied me. And it was a little disappointing because you know how you felt that anybody could accept you, it would be seminary, so that's what you're thinking. Maybe, that's what I'm thinking. And, I was denied. But the second semester, something just told me, say, no, you're going to apply again. And I applied the next semester, and I was accepted. And so I went to seminary, and of course, in between, I got married, and, so I didn't try to rush it. It took me some time to get finished. I transferred and went to Shaw for a while, then I came back. But I finally ended up, after about 2.5 years, I ended up going online, getting my finishing up. So I finished up, and I got my master's divinity degree. By that time, I had been called to pastor my church who here in Durham County, where I'm staying now. And of course, while I was with them, I continued my study, and of course, I got my D-Min, my doctor of ministry, and I stayed with the church for 32 years.
Wow.
Same church. We had a membership of about maybe 175, 200 on the road. On Sundays, about 100. And I stayed with them for 32 years. I became well known in the ministerial cycles, ministry here in Durham. Became president of the Interdenomination Ministerial Alliance. I became vice moderator and moderator of the association that my church was located in. I became the moderator of moderators for the General Baptist State Convention, where all the churches within North Carolina, Baptist churches, were part of. So I was going up the line. Everything was working well with me, and everything is still working well for me. I went to Henderson, where I had been practicing law, And one of the, you're going to like this story. And one of the lawyers who I knew well, white gentleman, he said to me, he said, Smitty, he said, you have done amazing. He said, I think lawyers would love to hear your story. You know, I think we could benefit from it. And there was only one other person who was a white gentleman. His name is Jim Blackburn. I don't think he minds me saying this, who the bar had approved to be a sponsor of ethics, mental health, and substance abuse. Mm-hmm. After he had been disbarred and was charged with embezzling funds, but he was out. They knew him very well, outstanding. He had prosecuted Jeffrey McDonald, if you remember that story way back there. I don't know if it was a long story, but anyway, he was the only person who was disbarred and who had been convicted of a felony that the bar allowed to sponsor continuing legal education, ethics, mental health, and substance abuse. So he told me, my friend told me, said, I think Jim is doing this, so why don't you try doing it? And I told him, I said, I don't know about that. Jim's situation was not violent. Mine was, but, and I said, I don't know the bar will let me do that. He said, well, you don't know. So when I came back home, I talked to my wife, who I now, July, we've been married for 35 years. Mm-hmm. So I talked with her, and I said, honey, I was down in Henderson and I talked with a lawyer, and he wanted me to check with the bar and see if I can get approved to do CLE. And I said, but I don't know about that. She said, well, you don't have your license anyway, so all they can say is no. So
I'm not going to take it again.
Exactly. So that was kind of push for me. And so I did. I applied, and first thing they asked me, I called over, and the first thing they asked me if I knew Jim, and that was the other lawyer I was telling you about who had been disbarred. And I say, no, I've heard of him. I don't know him personally. They said, well, you might want to talk with him first. Mm-hmm. And so I called him. They gave me his telephone number. I called him and talked to him. And we had breakfast or lunch or something. I think it was lunch. We had lunch together. And he told me how he did it, what he had to do, the information, how he drew up, how he wrote up his, plan for doing it, what have you, and gave me some good ideas. And so I came back and I did. It took me a little while to get my program together, what I want to talk about, how I want to share it and what have you. And I sent it into the bar. They want you to do your outline and, whether you're going to have a 6-hour course or 3-hour course, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I went for the big thing. I did the whole 6 hours, And so I sent it in, and they told me after sending it in, I got a letter saying, well, you'll hear from us I think it said something like within 7 or 10 days. The 10 days had come. I hadn't heard anything from the bar. You're going to like this story. And I said, I told him I said, it's 10 days and mail is wrong. I hear nothing from him. I said, I don't know. And Tim, the only thing that was going through my mind was that all they could see is African-American who had robbed a bank. You follow what I'm trying to say?
Oh, yeah.
And in my mind, I said, that's just not a good picture. Okay. Yeah. So what I did, and I tell people this story, my wife laughed at me. I got me a fresh haircut. I put on my 3-piece suit. I was old sayings, I was talked down. Okay. Yeah. And I went over to the state bar office, and I asked in Raleigh, and I asked the reception downstairs, I wanted to see somebody in the continuing legal education department. And they said, okay, we'll call somebody to come down. Call someone, and a lady came down, and when she saw me, Tim, this honest truth, when she saw me, I knew right then that she saw somebody different from what she thought she was going to see. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
so she just came up and we talked, and she said, Dr. Smith, she said, you will hear something from us within the next 3 to 5 days.
Right.
I said, okay. About 3 days afterwards, I got this letter saying that I was approved as a sponsor of continual education for the North Carolina State Bar, that I went all over the state. I taught ethics and mental health to lawyers all over the state, both black and white. I was one of the two. The other one was a white guy. I was an African guy. And I did that for 11 years. I only stopped doing it when COVID came in.
Wow. Yeah. See, when I'm bringing this back to like when you went to Gambling Anonymous and people, they say, oh, well, you're not a gambler. People can change. And I think there's a lot of people out there who, once you've done something, once you've had this experience or, maybe hurt people, they think, oh, you can never change. And that's not true,
Yeah.
but your heart has to change,
Yeah.
and you have to become a better person. And that's what you did. And, she probably did round file your application there initially. But once she saw you and you took the initiative to go in there and present yourself. Yeah. Man, that's impressive. Being a minister like that that's a tough job. Like you got to be on constantly, and at my house when I was a kid, the phone constantly ringing. Oh, Betty's in the hospital, or pray for Bob. Just all of this stuff nonstop, and it's like you really, man, you got to be I don't know how you stay in the spirit all the time, or you don't, and you just have to help people when you're having your own rough time. Like, how do you keep motivated? How do you keep,
It's not too hard. You do think about it. You get a call at 1:00 at night, you're in the bed, and I've had this happen. Somebody's husband just felt like he had a heart attack, and they had to rush him to the hospital. They call you, say, I don't know if he's going to make it or not. I've had that happen. And you get up. But then once you get there, it's just like you feel that's part of what your ministry is, and it even helps you. So you get motivated. I tell members all the time, sometimes I don't feel like doing it, but once I do it and we pray together, I think I am even feel better than they do, because it's just there. And so you kind of get used to that as being a part of your ministry, and you say, oh, this is what the Lord wants me to do, and I do it, and you get to enjoy it. I thought I wouldn't get back into it once I retired, because I told my wife, because what I did, I wanted to continue my ministry. So about 6 or 7 months before I retired, I told the church I was going to retire at the end of the year. That was in 22. I started a podcast. I'm doing what I started because I wanted to do something I thought would be encouraging, inspiring, and transforming. And so I started it, and I was going to be at home and just kind of do what we're doing now, just talking. And I've been doing that. I think I've done over 100 already. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, you're a veteran.
and so this is but then I was out for about 6 months in my ministry as a pastor at the end of 22. I stayed out to about August, a latter part of July. And the minister in my home church, who's a pastor, preached that Sunday. And that Monday, he died of a heart attack.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years old.
Oh.
And the deacons called me because they knew I retired. They called me and asked me to come down and work with them for about a month or two until they could kind of get a pulpit selection committee together and get things moving. And I agreed to do it. And I just tell you this, this month will be 18 months that I've been.
God yanked you right back into service.
So I'm still in the passion business even right now.
I love it.
Yeah, so but that's what we are.
Man, you've had an incredible life, and geez, like your spirit is, it's a good spirit.
Thank you.
You know,
I appreciate it.
I believe you can tell, you know, a
Thank you.
genuine person, and man, you're doing God's work. And you know, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this podcast. I was like I've said before, I was you know, wicked son of a pastor and
Mhm.
rebellious and all that stuff, but you know, I'm coming around.
I feel you. I feel
Yeah.
you. I feel you. I know exactly where you are.
Yeah. How's your how has your wife enjoyed being in the ministry?
Well, she enjoys it. She's fine, but she did tell me that now that I went back to interim pastor at my home church, she said, "When you retired, I finished now, so don't expect me to go with you every Sunday." So,
Yeah.
and so I've given her that privilege. I said, "If you don't feel like going, okay, I understand." So, and she just kind of, but she enjoys it when she goes. You know, she might not go every Sunday, but she's relaxing. She's retired from the school system. Was a public school teacher, and so she's probably been retired now about 12 years. 12, yeah, a little over. I know it's over 10.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. She deserves that retirement. I
Oh
know
yeah.
my mom, I mean, my dad was the pastor, but my mom was working in that church just as much as,
Oh yeah.
you know, almost as much as my dad.
Yeah.
And raising 5 kids at the
Oh,
same
yeah.
time. So
Mhm.
it's brutal.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but rewarding. Man, so people listening to this, if they, you know, if their heart is open to God, what,
Mhm.
you know, and you want to share some sort of a message with somebody listening, and
Mhm.
you know, what would you
Well, I have a few things I say to people. Uh, One of the things I like for anybody to know is that the darkest hour is just before dawn. And I truly believe it. You know, sometimes we get down and depressed, but if we don't give up, we can make it. I Because of my situation, I always tell people to confront the source. You know you're dealing with something, you got to confront it. You just got to, lay it out and deal with it. You got to accept responsibility, uh, and you can't let your circumstances be an excuse. And I just talked to you about, don't be afraid to fail, because, sometimes it's okay to fall if you get up,
fall
and that,
forward?
yeah, and that's where we are. So I'll just share those things. And if I had to sum it up into one word, people ask me this all the time. I always said, and I taught ethics and mental health and substance abuse, and I always say, if you are ethical, stay ethical. Make sure you stay ethical. And if you can do that, you will make it.
Yeah. You'll have a better life, and you'll sleep well at night.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, the mental health is kind of what I share on this podcast. You know, I suffered with a lot of PTSD, anxiety, depression. You know, I was in the military and lost my brother in a car accident. And yeah, just I was in law enforcement for 10 years and had some really terrible experiences. And but it made me the person I am. And I found help in God, but that came through experience with psychedelics, and that's just what worked for me. They're dealing with a lot of that stuff with veterans nowadays, and showing that it can help. And my experience opened up some thinking that I had never experienced before. And so I think, however I got there, I think I'm on the right path. And
Good.
yeah, just trying to help people and share the message that we're not alone. There is help, and don't quit. Keep moving forward. So, man,
I share all this in my book. People who may be interested. I have 2 books: Deal by Me, A Golden Opportunity to Belong. And some people ask me, why did I name it Deal by Me? That came from my poker playing. When you don't want the next hand, you say deal by me. So that's where I am. And about me golden opportunity blown, that was losing my law practice. Okay, so I that's how I framed my first book. And then when I wrote the other one, the second edition, that was a self-evaluation where I was telling when I came to the realization that I really was really not a compulsive gambler, but I just was afraid to fail. And
Yep.
once I, dealt with it all, then, I'm better. So, for listeners who would be interested in knowing more about me, check me out.
I'm going to tag you and everything, and I'm going to share this message with whoever I can. I mean, we're on the upswing. My channel's been growing
great.
fast. Yeah.
Great.
I don't know why, but we're going up. So,
well, that's key. That's key. That's the key.
Just gonna keep grinding, but I appreciate you taking the time to share your story with me. And man, any way you could say a prayer for us? Take us out of this thing?
Sure.
All right, let's do it.
God, we thank you for the privilege and opportunity to share with Tim today. I pray that you will continue to bless his podcast, and we're praying that somebody will be blessed just by hearing our stories today. And we just thank you for all that you do in our lives. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend. Thank you to everyone who watched this podcast and go out and buy that book. I appreciate you all.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.